Welcome to the second episode of the Pythian podcast. My name is Dylan Callahan, and I'm joined by Casey Pemberton. Casey, go ahead, and we'll start with you introducing yourself.
Hello, my name is Casey Pemberton. I am the current Chancellor Commander of Sicilian Lodge in Independence, Missouri.
And upcoming lodge.
Yes, and I will be Secretary of the upcoming Montauk Lodge in California, Missouri.
Thank you, Casey. And I'm Dylan Callahan. I'm current prelate of Sicilian Lodge number 39 in Independence, and I will also be secretary of the upcoming Damascus Lodge in Emporia, Kansas. Damascus Lodge number 445. And this is the part of the show where we give news and updates. I don't think there's too much news since the last episode we did, which was...
No, Damascus is still having their organization meeting.
Yes, we're still having our organization meeting. Sicilian Lodge itself is going to have a regular meeting next Saturday, 1 week from today, in Blue Springs. And I'm super excited about that one because we're going to be meeting in a private room. That has not been possible for a while due to COVID because libraries and other normal private meeting spaces have been closed, but we finally found an opening and it looks like we're going to have a really good ritualistic meeting. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Indeed.
All right, well, let's jump right into it then. So our previous episode number 1, was about charity. And so we're going to talk a little bit about friendship today because if you listen to the last episode, we kind of made it make sense that we would start with charity since it's not just sequentially central to our principles of friendship, charity, and benevolence, but also it is ideologically central. So charity takes a central role in Pythianism. Friendship takes a very basic, initial, primal spot within our fraternal order. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And as you probably noticed, we were not nervous at all in the last podcast. And we knew exactly what we were doing. And we said everything that we wanted said. One thing we did discuss shortly before starting, though, is our disclaimer. The reason we have a disclaimer, just to put a little disclaimer on the disclaimer, the reason we have a disclaimer is so that somebody doesn't listen to two gentlemen talking and think, they're Knights of Pythias. What they're talking about, when they're talking about the KFP, that must be indicative of what everybody who's in the Knights of Pythias believes. That must be exactly what is taught. No. Our disclaimer is there for a reason. We don't want you to take our discussions as canon or anything like that. Certainly, we hope that our conversations are true, correct, and educated, but it is indeed a fact that the opinions expressed here are not necessarily the opinions or even remotely the ideas of our Grand Lodges or Supreme Lodge.
Or subordinate lodges thereof.
Or any subordinate lodges thereof. Like we said, we're both in Sicilian. Each of us are going to be in a brand new lodge, 2 brand new lodges starting up. Our ideas and our conversations are just that, and they are not necessarily the opinions or thoughts or concepts espoused by any lodge within the Order of Knights of Pythias. So with that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take it upon myself to start us off.
Sounds great.
So friendship within the Knights of Pythias. Our order has as its very basic first tenet the concept of friendship, but it's not just one concept of friendship. I listened to it was actually a TED talk, but it was a very interesting concept that brotherhood is different from friendship. And this was in the context of a veteran and a war reporter who had been covering foreign wars overseas, many, many different countries over the years, and in his own experience and in his observation of troops overseas, that there is such a strong connection, such a strong tie, a bond of brotherhood. I'm not the first person to use that term, but a bond of brotherhood that transcends anything that you'd find in your normal everyday civilian life. And I certainly agree that that's true, especially nowadays. You're not going to find very strong bonds like that in civil society today. I don't think that's necessarily something that you can only find in the military. In fact, I know it's not something you can only find in the military. And I know it's not something that you cannot find in civilian life. But I think he made a strong point. His point was that when you speak of a friend, you're speaking of somebody with whom you get along well. When you speak of a brother, you're speaking of somebody with whom nothing can sever that bond, or at least nothing that would sever your average ordinary friendship would sever that bond. So without putting too many more provisos on that, the idea is that you would be willing to give your own life for your brother. Whereas you might have difficulty, you might have a hard time deciding, somebody who's merely an acquaintance, whether or not you would sacrifice, your time off of work for them, necessarily. So let's get right into the Pythian meaning of friendship. So there's a lot in our ritual, and that's the basic foundation of where every Pythian gets his understanding of Pythian friendship. It's from our ritual. And without getting too much into the ritual, it's no secret the Order of Knights of Pythias is based on the friendship of Damon and Pythias, who were historical figures. And some people actually get that confused. They think, oh, it's just a really nice story, and in fact, I've seen some children's storybooks with, very fanciful and colorful illustrations. It's not just a story, though. It's a true story, and it was very profound. It made a profound impact on the people of Greece and Greco-Roman times and the ancients. They really did share this story as inspirational and profound. And the basic story goes, I could probably spend an hour. They've written entire plays. There are movies about the friendship of Damon and Pythias. But the basic story is that Pythias gives himself up to be a hostage so that Damon can escape the headsman's axe for but a few hours to settle his affairs. And then the idea is he will come back and take his final punishment. And that sort of friendship, that's a concept that even Jesus spoke about. There's no greater love than this, than a man give his life for his friend. And so the way it played out for Damon and Pythias is that they both actually wound up giving their lives for each other. In the first place, Pythias stood in Damon's place so that Damon could go and settle his own family affairs at home, and then Damon pledged to come back. So the fact that Damon had the opportunity to escape for good and live out the rest of his life, when Damon did come back, Pythias is still there, and he was even hoping and praying that Damon would not return so that his friend's life would be spared. And it's a very inspirational thing. So that's the sort of friendship that the Knights of Pythias espouses. That's the very basic idea. Brother Casey, would you like to jump in there?
Sure. And to add on to that, with that story, you have Pythias in chains, in bondage, and his fiance or wife, it's not entirely clear which at the time, is urging him to leave. The king wanting to prove partly just that these two are fools, but really not just that, wanting to prove, because backstory again, they were members of the Pythagorean Brotherhood, wanting to kind of show that all of these Pythagoreans are fools, they're not men of their word. he's trying to urge Pythias to leave. He wants Pythias to run away. That way he can show, yeah, they're not men of their word. They'll flee the first chance they get. They'll be happy to go back on their word. He won't do it. They can't make him do it. They can't make him abandon his word and his friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a powerful image to have. We have a similar image in the Bible between Jonathan and David. If you remember that story, Jonathan, his own father is hunting after David. And Jonathan sees David on at least one, I think multiple occasions, while this manhunt is going on, and doesn't turn him over. Instead, he helps him. He cares for him. To quote from the same document as last time, the principles of Pythian knighthood, its basic ends and principles, the address by Reverend L.V. Price. Pythian friendship is what a Jonathan would do for a David, or what a Pythias would do for a Damon. If he loved him, and that one night will do for another, if for no other motive because of his covenant vows. That is a friendship, so far ideal that it leaves no duty of friendship, however delicate or severe, unperformed. The precepts and offices of the ideal enter so far into the real that a true knight is impelled by all that holds him dear or sacred to exhaust every resource within his reach to promote the welfare of a brother or their family. And that's a big thing, within fraternalism, but especially within the Knights of Pythias. This idea is, a lot of people think of it as, well, you'll help a brother. It goes beyond that, even though you've completely adopted their family as your family. By adopting them, you're considering this brother to be your family, yes, but that also means you're willing to look out for their children, for their wife, whether they're a widow or not. You're willing to look out for everything and care for for his family as though they were your own. And I think that's a point of friendship that we don't see a lot of times in modern society. I know when we went on a podcast before, the Historic Light podcast.
Huge shout out to them. Great guys.
Yes. Great guys. And we were discussing this. One of the things I discussed that I really hadn't thought about too much before then, when you look at history, you'll see many, many people who were Pythians and Masons, or Oddfellows and Masons. Albert Pike, the most famous Mason out there, I would imagine, he was an Oddfellow before he was ever a Mason. These people didn't just join to be joiners most of the time, especially considering how active they were in all of these groups. They joined because there was a new lesson in each organization, even if they all shared some bases.
Mm-hmm.
In Masonry, the focus is internal and your internal growth. In Pythianism, the focus is the growth of an outward growth, your friendships. How do I become a better friend? And that extends even into your family. How do I become a better brother to my actual blood siblings? A better son to my parents? A better husband to my wife? A better parent? The lessons of Pythianism aid in that.
I would say, to your point, that the same principles that you would apply in Pythianism, friendship, charity, and benevolence, they really do apply across the board. And we can get in a second to the three different kinds of friendship that Pythianism identifies. But really, there is no principle or concept within the Pythian meaning of friendship that does not apply to any other relationship, whether it's a business, familial, romantic. There's no principle of Pythian friendship that does not apply across the board. And that's something that I think is very noteworthy, especially when it comes to the sister concept, the sister principle of charity, which we discussed last time. Charity is extending grace to another person, and that's really what relationships are based on, extending grace from the one person to the other person. And if you can't do that in one relationship, then you can't do it in another. Or if you can do it in one and not in another, then you don't really understand the concept of friendship or of charity yourself.
Yeah, I think a thing that Pythianism teaches. Okay, this is a thing you tapped into on that same podcast.
Mm.
If you'd asked me beforehand if I was satisfied with my friendships, yeah, I would have said so, because I didn't have a different scope for what a friendship should be.
A lot of perspective.
I had a scope that a friend is someone who you're probably willing to help out if you can, if you're not too busy that day, and you guys enjoy hanging out together. You probably have one or two hobbies alike, or you know each other from work. That's what, in my mind, a friend was. What I got out of Pythianism was a deeper understanding that a friendship can and should be deeper than that.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be in every situation,
Right.
but there is a deeper type of friendship, and that's a friendship we should strive for.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not every friendship is going to be, but we should try to have that deeper friendship as much as we can.
Yeah, and I would even say that there are some friendships that it's probably not the best idea to actively pursue something necessarily deeper, necessarily. I think that's a really good segue, Casey, into the same speech, the same document on Pythian knighthood that we were discussing last time. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into that because Reverend Price has a lot of really good stuff to say on this subject. So I'm just going to read a brief paragraph of his. He says that the trinity of virtues, so to speak, are friendship, charity, and benevolence. Friendship, there are three senses in which the term is used. The friendship having its root in motives of what is agreeable, and therefore called the friendship of pleasure. So sort of what you were just talking about a second ago with friends that, yeah, you can hang out with them, and if it's not too much of an imposition, you can help them out, if you have the time. So that would probably be the friendship of pleasure, where, you like hanging out with them, you have some shared hobbies or something. Continuing the quote, the friendship having its root in self-interest, therefore called the friendship of utility. So
your work friendships.
Yeah, work friendships, or somebody that hey, they're really good with cars. I'll call up my friend who's good with cars, and that's all we ever talk about or do is he works on my car. That might be an example of a friendship of utility. And last, the friendship having its root in disinterested love, and therefore called the friendship of virtue. This friendship is par excellence, and is possible only when it is only possible between the pure and good. It is the ideal friendship of Pythian knighthood. The friendship of pleasure and the friendship of utility are recognized, admitted, and acted upon in our order, but only as the grounds for securing in each knight the reality of the ideal, the friendship of virtue. In every organization men are admitted, of necessity so, who are honorable, true men, but who are not capable at first and on formal acquaintance of commanding the love of their fellow men. They must be received, if at all, as friends, must be treated as such, and all the duties of friendship must be performed toward them. This can be done only from motives of pleasure or utility. Recognizing this fact, Pythian knighthood exalts this baser kind of friendship by placing each knight under solemn and binding obligations to put into it his honor and his life. It carries with it all a man is or has. It makes him faithful to his friend even unto death. It is a friendship that proves itself in the hour of trial or peril. And then he goes on to talk about what Jonathan would do for a David, what Pythias would do for a Damon, because he loved him, that one knight will do for another. If from no other motive, then because of his covenant vows. So that's an interesting thing within itself, because we've talked about how friendship, charity, and benevolence build upon each other. But even those three senses outlined here, even they build on each other. Friendship of pleasure, of utility, and finally, and the most high form of friendship, that friendship of disinterested love, of virtue, of just wanting to see the other person succeed for the fact that you want to see them succeed. You're not necessarily gaining anything except satisfaction in seeing your friend do well. And that's, I mean, you can't even speak those words, you can't even think those thoughts without immediately going into the concepts of charity and benevolence at that point. As we discussed last week, the difference between, or whenever it was, I think it was last week, the difference between charity and benevolence being that with charity, you're extending to somebody graces and mercies. And with benevolence, you're directly contributing, to them, either in a charitable way, not to confuse terms, but either in a charitable way or in a philanthropic way. So I think it still amazes me how even the concepts within the concepts within the concepts, all these principles absolutely do build upon each other. And I'm going to be honest, I cannot imagine that the men, the physical incarnate men who put this together, even as they did it, I think this is something that, I think there are just some logical conclusions that started out from absolutely pure intentions, from, from Justice Rathbone himself saying, I think this story of Damon and Pythias, I think that sort of friendship needs to be inculcated in our society today. Our nation's torn by civil war. We need true brotherhood again. We need people sacrificing themselves for others. I think even as they were putting this together, they couldn't fully have appreciated exactly what the logical benefits, but the logical conclusions would be for that, where you have all of these amazing philosophies and principles that come so organically from just the organization itself. It's something that I really appreciate about the order from an historical and from a personal standpoint.
Agreed. I personally think, not to sound like a doomsayer. Well, actually, quite the opposite. I don't, as much division as we have right now, I don't think we were nearly as divided as we were at the time this was written.
Oh, for sure.
And, the idea that amid everything, this was what a group of men set out to do, that an understanding that, men, we as people learn best when all of our senses are engaged. Not just sitting and listening to something, but actually walking through it and being physically engaged. Having to work our way through the ritual. I think that's a great way to impart these lessons. I think what we talked about before, where you are given that physical example of charity in the second degree or rank rather.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also segues perfectly into this. It's also a wonderful example of friendship, obviously, and truly and fully disinterested friendship, because at that moment, the example given, it doesn't benefit anyone either way.
Right.
So I I think it's great to see the ideas build upon each other throughout the rank work. And going back to what I had mentioned before, again, it's mainly with Masonry and Odd Fellowship, more than likely as well. But even here, you can see the self-conclusions of the idea of biblical ideals being true. There's a reason why in the epistles and even in the Gospels, constantly he's Jesus and Paul and the others are referring to people as brother. There's meant to be among Christian fellows as well a deeper friendship, a deeper care than just a friendship of utility or a friendship of passion,
Yeah.
pleasure, passion, a friendship of pleasure. There's meant to
Either
be
one.
that.
Either would apply. Yeah.
Yeah, there's meant to be that more uniting feeling that you are willing to lay down your life. I know a lot of translation. You mentioned that one friend would lay down his life for another. There are translations that say brother,
Hmm.
and I think that is equally applicable and really a good thought to have, that, that's what we should be willing to do. We should be ready as Pythians or as Christians, either one, ready to lay down our lives for a fellow brother in need.
Yes. And I think it's noteworthy whether you call them a brother, because I mean this comes up a lot in fraternalism in the church. Not like it's some ongoing controversy in most cases, but calling somebody your brother, you'll run into people in the street. I don't know. Actually, I hear people say that a lot. I never run into anybody in the street. I think you get a ticket if you run into somebody on the street. But does anybody actually run into people on the street anymore? Like, who walks down the street? I mean, I don't really ever walk down the street and run into people. But what I mean is, uh, I encounter people in various situations that I really don't know, or I don't know them very well. And they say, "Hey, brother," or they're just talking, and then they'll drop, "All right, well, it's good to see you, brother." And all right, well, I don't really know you that well, and that actually brings me to another point that we can talk about at another time. But you know, throwing the term brother around, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing to see somebody that you don't really know that well in the same plane as somebody that you have, obligated yourself to? You know, I don't see a major problem with that. Once I think it over, it kind of it kind of comes with the territory of fraternalism. You believe in the universal brotherhood of mankind. And so I really do think that it's a good thing. Certainly, though, it would be profaning the sacred to refer to a man as a brother and then stab him in the back, or to generally treat him in an unbrotherly or uncharitable fashion. So I don't think I have a problem with relative strangers referring to each other as brother so much as I do anyone betraying the trust, even if it's just that basic social trust of, you're at the library, hey, can you watch my stuff while I go to the bathroom real quick? Say that to a stranger, and then that person's in charge of making sure that your stuff does not get stolen for the next 5 minutes. I think there is a good, solid, basic human trust there that's good to inculcate. And if referring to each other as brother helps that, that's good. If referring to each other as brother ruins the title, I don't think that's the fault of the term. I don't think that's the fault of calling somebody a brother. I think that's the fault of whoever does it. Certainly, you and I both know, Casey, there have been people who are bona fide, dyed in the wool, fully obligated, I should say, rather than actually dedicated. People who have been fully obligated as a brother, who have just completely betrayed that trust, in a time frame that's quantifiable, let's say by hours. So it's not the title, it's the principle. It's not even the Order Knights of Pythias. It's what you do as a person that defines the word and defines your understanding of it and defines how it's to be perceived by society, I think.
I would agree. I think that a common misconception, I had it at first, and it was one of the reasons that it would confuse me. How did he think that this organization, would solve all these problems within society? Because, at the best, fraternalism has never made up more than, I think it was 30% of the population at its height. And in my mind at the time, I was, because he obviously thought everyone would join, and that's laughably ridiculous. No, obviously he knew everyone wouldn't join. Obviously he didn't want everyone to join. But the ideals would be spread so much by those that did join that it would be undeniable that they had an effect on society.
Right.
And I think looking at it now from that perspective, I like this idea of, I even kind of like the idea of strangers calling each other brother, so long as you're not turning around and stealing their stuff when you said you'd watch it, or in some other way stabbing these people who you just 5 seconds ago called your brother.
Right. And like I said, even without the term brother, it's something that, it's not the word, it's the action. It's not the spoken word, it's not even the thought that counts. It's what you do. It's not who you are underneath, it's what you do that defines you. That's what Batman said. Or that's what Rachel said. But okay, so final thoughts. I'll go first this time. My final thought on the Pythian meaning of friendship is that I think it is legitimately the continuance of a concept that is thousands of years old. I think it's been exemplified in various, you can call them heroes, role models, characters, actual historical figures. I think the Pythian meaning of friendship and its various stages, its various concepts, I think it's been done, but it's never been the norm. The Pythian meaning of friendship has never been the norm. Why was it so notable that Pythias would give himself as a hostage for Damon? Why was it so notable that Damon would return to face the headsman's axe? I think it's notable because it's uncommon. You mentioned before the tyrant Dionysius, wanting to prove that, these Pythagoreans, they're just like everybody else. They're as money grubbing as anyone else. They're as, corrupt as anyone else. I think it was to his benefit to say, just to give it a brief backstory, the tyrant Dionysius was so called tyrant because he rose to power by promising the mob that all these rich people, all these landowners, all the gentry, we're going to take their stuff and give it to you. And why do you deserve it? Why do the people deserve it? Because, well, you're not corrupt, are you? You're not greedy. The people who have because they're greedy. And so it is up to me, the new king, to come into power and take from those who, be a Robin Hood figure. And so it was to his benefit to see this other part of society that included a lot of the landowning, population, nobility, if you will, if such a concept can be applied. It was a boon to him that he can show that I'm the only person you can trust. I'm in charge. I'm taking stuff. I'm redistributing. I'm the only one you can trust here. So it was to his benefit to show that these other people who were promoting the better and brighter in mankind generally, they're just like the rest of them. You can't get power as an individual that way. Power comes top down, right? And it was to his benefit to see that proven. And instead, what does Dionysius do at the end of the story? He asks, hey, I want what you guys have. I want to join this brotherhood. Because he saw the power in that. He was the one actually missing out on the power. Because the people were so taken by it. It's a very inspiring story. But like I said, where I'm going in this long, rambling final thought is that it's a very old concept that just has never been the norm. And I have no delusions of grandeur that the Knights of Pythias, after 150 some years, coming up on 160, I think.
I think we're at 151.
We're at 151? Okay. Yes, that's right. Math. After all these years, no, it's still not the norm. And like you said, at its height, fraternalism, a third of the population, not even half. But it's worth trying, if for no other reason than you're improving yourself and the lives of those around you. Take it away, Brother Casey.
So, much like last time, I'm going to end with a thought from the Reverend. If not the divinest love in the breasts of Pythian knights and nerves the strong arm to strike in defense of each other's honor or each other's right, it dares to sacrifice, to suffer, to die. Talking on friendship, and I think that's what Pythian friendship comes down to. It's a willingness to both live and die by your brothers. It's a willingness to stand up to their defense. And I think an unnoted part of this in this episode that comes along with standing up by a brother's defense is reminding them, to take from the ideas of Masonry, is reminding them in the most gentle manner of their failings and aiding in their reformation. We all do have failings. This extends back to charity. And a good friend recognizes that we have failings and is willing to stand by us and help us through it. And for lack of better terms, not just be a jerk about it. They're there to help. And so long as we want to change and we can't, and it seems we can, they're there to help us change. And I think that above all the others is a part of friendship that is not really touched upon or thought about in modern society. Again, we just like to have the friendships of pleasure. And that's understandable, but having had deeper friendships through fraternalism and through my faith both, I can't say that I'd want to go back to a time when all of my friendships were skin deep. I very much prefer having a lot of these deeper friendships with people. That's all I got.
Well, I can't disagree with the word you said, and so I won't. Sometimes it's hard to know how to end these, but I think we've covered well the basics and then some. There's a lot more to say, I think, but then you start getting into ritual and things. So at the end of the day, my best advice is to check out your local Knights of Pythias, see what they're about. And all of the documents that we will be referencing in the course of this podcast series, all the documents are available online. You just kind of have to know where to look. Library of Congress online has a lot of good resources for Knights of Pythias. That's actually where I found this. I do own the physical paper books, Pythian Knighthood, Jewels of Pythian Knighthood, A Brief History of the Order Knights of Pythias. But you can find those for free online. So
could we put a link to the one that we've been referencing these past 2 episodes in the description?
No, that sounds like work.
Oh. Okay.
Yes, I will definitely do that. So check out the link in the description. Don't forget to smash that like button. I don't know, what does the like button even do? I don't know.
I think it puts you in front of more people.
Is that a good thing?
It lets other people hear it. I don't know.
I don't
I'm
know.
not a YouTuber normally.
I don't think I'm polished enough. I don't think I'm ready. I'm not ready for the limelight, Yeah, I'm sure at our height, with all 50 of our subscribers, will be notable. People will stop me on the street. At least they won't run into me on the street. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you, Brother Casey, for joining me again,
Thank you.
joining us together. We, thank myself. And I do believe our next episode, whenever it comes out, will be on the final cardinal principle of benevolence.
I believe so.
All right.
And then we'll get to the juicy stuff, I guess, and
Yes.
the more controversial stuff.
A controversial subject is raised. All right. Thank you, and goodbye.